Karoline Leavitt's recent press conference took an unexpected turn when she ordered the removal of a liberal reporter who kept asking the same question over and over. This moment has stirred debate across the political spectrum. Some say she was just doing her job and keeping control of the room. Others argue it was an attack on press freedom. In this script, we'll go over exactly what happened, how people reacted, and what this means for the future of journalism and government transparency. First, we'll take a close look at Karoline Leavitt's background, 400 words. Who is she, and how did she become the White House press secretary? We'll explore her rise in politics, her experience working with conservative media, and her past interactions with reporters. Understanding her history can help explain why this moment was so significant. Next, we'll break down the press conference itself, 600 words. We'll set the scene, the date, the topic being discussed, and the tone of the room before things got heated. Then, we'll go step by step through what the reporter asked, how Leavitt responded, and how tensions built up. Finally, we'll describe the moment security was called in, and the reporter was escorted out. After that, we'll dive into the reaction from the media and the public, 600 words. Different news outlets have taken different angles on the story, and we'll highlight their perspectives. Social media has also been buzzing with opinions from both sides. We'll break down what conservatives, liberals, journalists, and everyday people are saying about what went down. Then, we'll discuss the bigger issue, the balance between press freedom and government control, 600 words. Is it ever okay to remove a reporter from a press briefing? How does this compare to past administrations? We'll look at similar moments from previous press secretaries like Kayleigh McEnany, Jen Psaki, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, to see if this incident stands out or follows a pattern. We'll also cover the political impact of this moment, 500 words. How are politicians responding? Are Republicans backing Leavitt while Democrats are calling it an abuse of power? And does this situation help or hurt Leavitt's reputation? With the next election on the horizon, this could have consequences beyond just one press conference. Finally, we'll look at what happens next, 300 words. Could this change the way future press briefings are handled? Will journalists push back harder, or will the White House set stricter rules? Could legal action come into play? We'll explore the possible outcomes and what this moment means for the future of political journalism. To wrap things up, we'll leave the audience with a question, 150 words. Was Karoline Leavitt right to remove the reporter, or was this a step too far? We'll encourage viewers to share their thoughts and keep the conversation going. And of course, we'll remind them to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates on political news. Karoline Leavitt is the White House press secretary, a role that puts her in charge of handling questions from journalists and representing the administration's stance on major issues. She is known for her strong conservative views and her no-nonsense approach when dealing with the media. Over time, she has built a reputation for being firm in her responses and pushing back when she feels reporters are being unfair or aggressive. This has made her a favorite among conservatives, but also a target for criticism from those who believe she avoids tough questions. At a recent press conference, tensions reached a boiling point when a liberal reporter repeatedly pressed Leavitt on a controversial issue. The reporter, known for challenging conservative figures, kept asking the same question over and over, refusing to accept Leavitt's answers. The exchange became more intense, with both sides refusing to back down. Eventually, Leavitt made the decision to have the reporter removed from the room. This moment quickly went viral, sparking debates about press freedom, government accountability, and whether or not Leavitt was justified in her actions. This event is more than just a heated exchange between a press secretary and a reporter. It raises important questions about how the government interacts with the media, how much control press secretaries should have over briefings, and whether this was an isolated incident or part of a bigger trend. Some argue that Leavitt was simply doing her job by maintaining order, while others believe this was an attack on journalism and free speech. With the political climate already deeply divided, this moment has only added fuel to the fire. Karoline Leavitt has quickly become one of the most talked-about figures in conservative politics. She first gained attention as a young and outspoken Republican, building her career through media and political communications. Before stepping into the role of White House press secretary, she worked as a spokeswoman for high-profile conservative politicians and organizations, making a name for herself as someone who could confidently defend right-wing policies and take on tough media questions. Her ability to stay calm under pressure and push back against what she sees as biased reporting helped her rise quickly in the political world. Leavitt's background in media and communications gave her an edge when she stepped into the White House. She understands how reporters operate and she knows how to control a message. This experience has made her a key player in the administration's effort to handle tough press conferences. She has been involved in several heated exchanges with journalists, refusing to let them control the narrative. Her supporters see her as a fighter who won't let the media twist the facts, while her critics argue that she avoids accountability and shuts down difficult questions. Some of Leavitt's most notable moments include sharp back-and-forth debates with journalists from major networks. She has been known to call out reporters for what she views as misleading questions and has gained attention for quickly dismissing claims she believes are unfair or incorrect. In some cases, her responses have gone viral, with conservative media celebrating her ability to stand firm and push back against what they see as media bias. These moments have only strengthened her position as a leading voice in the administration, someone who isn't afraid to take on the press and challenge their narratives. Leavitt's strong stance in press briefings has earned her praise from many conservatives who believe the mainstream media is too hostile toward right-wing leaders. To them, she represents a much-needed counterbalance to journalists who they feel push a liberal agenda. She has positioned herself as someone who will not let the media dictate the conversation, instead taking control and ensuring the administration's message is delivered on its own terms. Whether people see her as a hero or a problem, there is no doubt that she is a powerful force in today's political landscape. The press conference started like any other, with Karoline Leavitt stepping up to the podium to take questions from the press. The room was packed with reporters from major news outlets, all eager to press her on the latest political issues. The atmosphere was tense, as it often is in these briefings, but no one expected things to take the turn they did. The topic that caused the biggest stir was a policy decision the administration had made earlier that week, one that had already been heavily criticized by left-leaning media. Among the reporters in the room was one who had a history of challenging conservative politicians, and they were determined to get an answer that fit their narrative. As soon as the floor was opened for questions, the reporter jumped in. They asked Leavitt a direct question about the administration's stance, implying that the policy was harmful. Leavitt, staying composed, responded by explaining the administration's reasoning and dismissed the criticism as misleading. But the reporter wasn't satisfied. They asked the same question again, slightly reworded, pushing her to admit fault. Leavitt, showing some frustration, gave a firm response, making it clear she had answered and wouldn't be repeating herself. Instead of moving on, the reporter kept pressing. Each time Leavitt answered, they found a way to bring the question back, determined to make her slip up or give an answer that could be used against her. At this point, the room began to shift. Some reporters looked on, waiting to see how far this would go. Others seemed uncomfortable, sensing that the back and forth was no longer productive. Despite the growing tension, the reporter refused to let go. Leavitt's patience was wearing thin. Her responses became sharper, and she made it clear she was done addressing the question. But the reporter still wouldn't stop. They interrupted, spoke over her, and refused to acknowledge that she had already provided an answer. Finally, after repeated warnings, Leavitt signaled to security. Within seconds, officers approached the reporter and asked them to leave. Even as they were being escorted out, they continued to protest, insisting that they had the right to demand answers. The room fell silent for a moment before Leavitt moved on, as if nothing had happened. But the moment wasn't going to be forgotten. Almost immediately, journalists began tweeting about the incident and clips started spreading online. The press conference wasn't over yet, but the real story had already been written. Karoline? Leavitt had just kicked out a reporter for refusing to back down. The question now was whether this was a justified move or an abuse of power. The press conference incident quickly became the biggest political story of the day. Within hours, major media outlets were running headlines about Karoline Leavitt's decision to remove the reporter. But as expected, coverage looked very different, depending on which network you turned to. CNN and MSNBC framed the incident as an attack on press freedom, with anchors and guests arguing that it set a dangerous precedent. They questioned whether the administration was trying to silence journalists, who asked tough questions and warned that this could become a pattern if left unchecked. Some commentators even called it an abuse of power, claiming that public officials should never have the authority to remove reporters simply for being persistent. On the other side, Fox News and other conservative media outlets had a completely different take. They defended Leavitt, arguing that the reporter was being disruptive and refusing to follow pressroom decorum. Several hosts pointed out that past Democratic administrations had also clashed with journalists and accused the left of hypocrisy for suddenly caring about press freedom. They praised Leavitt for standing her ground and maintaining control of the briefing room, arguing that reporters don't have the right to hijack press conferences just to push their own agenda. While the mainstream media debated the issue on air, the conversation exploded online. On Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, clips of the moment spread like wildfire. Some users slammed Leavitt for what they saw as an authoritarian move, while others cheered her on for shutting down what they believed was a biased journalist. Hashtags like press freedom and Karoline Leavitt trended, with both sides using the moment to push their own political views. Short video edits of the exchange gained millions of views, with captions that either portrayed the reporter as a victim of government overreach or as an unprofessional activist trying to provoke a reaction. The reaction was just as divided among everyday people. Conservatives largely stood by Leavitt, calling the reporter's behavior disrespectful and saying that press briefings should be about getting real answers, not creating viral moments. Some pointed to similar incidents from past administrations, arguing that the media was blowing this out of proportion just because a conservative was involved. Meanwhile, liberals saw this as another example of an administration trying to avoid accountability, comparing it to past moments when journalists were shut down for asking uncomfortable questions. They warned that if this kind of behavior became normal, the government would have even more control over the press. No matter which side people were on, one thing was clear. This moment had struck a nerve. The debate wasn't just about one press conference. It was about the bigger battle between the media and the government and the deep political divide shaping public opinion. Press freedom has always been a pillar of American democracy. The First Amendment guarantees the right of journalists to challenge those in power, ensuring that the government remains transparent and accountable. Press briefings are one of the most important ways the public gets direct answers from the administration, but they are also a battleground. Every White House press secretary faces the challenge of managing tough questions while maintaining order. The government wants to control its messaging, while the media fights to get the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The incident with Karoline Leavitt has reignited the debate. Was her decision to remove the reporter justified, or was it an attack on the free press? To better understand this issue, it's important to look at history. Clashes between the White House and the press are nothing new. Many past press secretaries have had their fair share of heated moments with reporters. Kayleigh McEnany, who served under Donald Trump, was known for her aggressive approach, often calling out what she saw as biased questions from liberal reporters. She made headlines for shutting down CNN's Jim Acosta multiple times, refusing to entertain what she claimed were misleading narratives. Conservatives praised her for standing up to the media, while liberals accused her of dodging accountability. Jen Psaki, who worked under Joe Biden, had a more composed style, but was still accused of sidestepping difficult questions, especially from conservative outlets like Fox News. She often used humor or sharp responses to deflect uncomfortable topics, leading to criticism that she was avoiding transparency. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, another press secretary from the Trump administration, had one of the most intense battles with the press, including an incident where the White House temporarily revoked Jim Acosta's press pass after a heated exchange. These past examples show that tensions between the press and the government aren't unique to any one party. Both Republican and Democratic administrations have had moments where they pushed back against the media, sometimes even restricting access. The question now is, when does that pushback become suppression? There is an argument to be made that press briefings need structure and control. Reporters must follow certain rules to ensure the briefing remains productive. If a journalist keeps repeating the same question, refuses to accept an answer, or disrupts the flow of the event, the press secretary has the right to maintain order. Otherwise, the briefing turns into chaos and other reporters don't get the chance to ask their questions. Leavitt's defenders argue that this is exactly what happened in this case. The reporter refused to let go of the issue, hijacking the conference and preventing a meaningful discussion on other topics. From this perspective, her removal wasn't about suppressing the press, it was about maintaining professionalism. But on the other hand, press freedom exists to hold the government accountable. If officials can remove reporters simply for being persistent, it sets a dangerous precedent. Some argue that politicians use decorum as an excuse to silence difficult questions. The role of the press is not just to report government statements but to challenge them, especially when they are vague or misleading. If the administration can decide who gets to ask questions and who gets removed, it raises concerns about the government controlling the narrative instead of facing real scrutiny. Critics of Leavitt's actions argue that the reporter was just doing their job, and removing them was a way to dodge accountability rather than maintain order. So where do we draw the line? When does removing a journalist become necessary, and when does it become censorship? The answer isn't always clear. Some believe that as long as a press secretary gives an answer, even if it's not the one the journalist wants, they should move on. Others argue that the press has a duty to keep pushing when an answer is vague or incomplete. In the end, it comes down to whether you believe the reporter was being disruptive or simply doing their job. This debate isn't going away anytime soon. Every administration will face moments like this, and each time the reactions will be just as divided. But one thing is certain: the balance between press freedom and government control will continue to be one of the biggest battles in American politics. The political fallout from Karoline Leavitt's decision to remove the reporter was immediate. Both Democrats and Republicans had strong reactions, each using the moment to push their own political narratives. Democrats criticized Leavitt, claiming that the administration was trying to silence tough questions. Many saw this as an attack on the free press and argued that the White House should be open to scrutiny, not shutting down journalists who ask difficult questions. Some Democratic lawmakers called for an apology, while others suggested that this incident exposed a deeper issue of avoiding accountability. Progressive media figures and activists used the moment to rally support, claiming it was yet another example of conservative leadership trying to control the media rather than answering legitimate concerns. On the Republican side, the response was very different. Conservatives defended Leavitt, arguing that she had every right to remove a reporter who was disrupting the briefing. They pointed to past Democratic press secretaries who had dismissed conservative reporters and accused the media of having a double standard. Many saw this as a moment of strength, proving that Leavitt was willing to stand up against what they view as biased journalists pushing an agenda. Republican politicians and commentators praised her handling of the situation, calling it an example of strong leadership in the face of media hostility. Some even suggested that this moment could boost her influence within the party, positioning her as a rising star in conservative politics. This incident also had an impact on the ongoing Biden versus Trump rivalry. While neither directly addressed it, their supporters wasted no time using the situation to attack the other side. Biden supporters framed it as another example of authoritarian behavior creeping into Republican politics, comparing it to past moments when Trump clashed with the press. On the other hand, Trump supporters argued that the mainstream media has long been against conservative administrations, claiming that this was just another example of unfair treatment. This divide showed how press freedom, like many issues in outside America, is now a deeply partisan debate, with both sides interpreting the same event in completely different ways. For Karoline Leavitt, the big question is whether this boosts or damages her credibility. Among conservatives, it likely strengthens her reputation as a tough, no-nonsense press secretary who refuses to be pushed around. If anything, this could make her even more popular among Republicans who see the media as hostile to their beliefs. However, in the eyes of critics, this move could hurt her credibility, making her look like she can't handle tough questions without resorting to shutting down journalists. Some will argue that a truly strong press secretary should be able to stand firm without removing reporters. Whether this moment is a short-term controversy or a lasting issue for Leavitt and the administration remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: this incident has fueled even more division in an already polarized political climate. This incident isn't just about one press conference. It raises bigger questions about the future of press briefings and how journalists interact with the government. Does this set a precedent? If a press secretary can remove a reporter for being too persistent, will this become more common? Some fear that this could lead to tighter control over the press room, where only friendly reporters are given space to ask questions. If that happens, it could make it harder for journalists to challenge the administration and get real answers for the public. There's also the possibility of legal action or journalist protests. If the reporter who was removed decides to take legal steps, this could turn into a First Amendment case, bringing even more attention to the issue of press freedom. Media organizations might also push back by demanding clearer rules for press briefings or even boycotting certain events in protest. In the past, journalists have stood together against restrictions, and if they feel this was a serious overreach, they may take collective action to prevent it from happening again. At the heart of it all is a bigger question. What does this mean for free speech in journalism? The press is meant to hold those in power accountable, but that only works if they have the freedom to ask tough questions without fear of being removed. If press secretaries, no matter the administration, start using removal as a tool to control the narrative, it could change the way journalism operates in Washington. Whether this incident fades away or sparks long-term changes will depend on how both the media and the government respond in the coming weeks. This moment has people talking, and opinions couldn't be more divided. Was Karoline Leavitt simply keeping order in the briefing room, or did she cross a line by removing the reporter? The debate over press freedom and government control is more important than ever, and your voice matters. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if you found this breakdown useful, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an update. Stay with us as we continue bringing you the truth behind the headlines.